seen their wages undercut because there's been a mass influx of cheap labour from the European Union, and therefore their wages have gone down. And I think the Labour Party is a party that I joined because they're a party of workers' rights. I supported their policies on housing and education, of course, but that's the main thing that they were set up, to exist for. That's what they're meant to be fighting for. So for Labour to support free movement and to turn a complete blind eye, to this idea of workers being undercut because of free movement, I just think it shows that Corbyn is completely out of touch with the working class in this country.
Yeah.
Dara, I agree with everything you've said. So how come you're still a Labour Party member then?
Yes.
I agree with the core Labour values, and I think, like lots of, Brexiteers in the north, I would agree with the ideas of, public ownership of the railways, anti-austerity, workers' rights. It's just I don't agree with Corbyn. I think the problem with Corbyn and Diane Abbott and John McDonnell is that they're very idealistic. They're almost like hippie socialists. They don't really connect with the concerns of the working class. They want to stay in the single market. They're not concerned about immigration. And I think, Nigel, Paul Nuttall and your party, I think they're going to take away so many votes from Labour. Because at the moment, Corbyn is just not listening. I mean, Miliband was the same, Blair was the same, Gordon Brown was the same. They're not learning and they're not listening. Because I think they're stuck in this situation on Brexit where there's half of the party, like me, and half of the voters who will go out to UKIP if Labour support a so-called soft Brexit, which, as far as I'm concerned, that's not Brexit at all. That's the same as staying.
So Dara, could you, as a paid-up Labour Party member, could you contemplate voting UKIP at the next general election?
You know what? I wouldn't want to, because I agree with your party on Brexit and on immigration, but I'm not so sure about some of the stuff that your party has said on the NHS. And like I say, generally, I would agree with Labour on most issues. But if the next election is, an election about Brexit, Nigel, and I'm one of the hardest Brexiteers you'll meet, okay, I think there's a possibility that I could vote UKIP. I mean, I'd probably vote Labour, but I wouldn't rule out.
Well, Dara, let me tell you, on the Brexit issue, and we're not discussing that this hour particularly, but on the Brexit issue, I am absolutely, completely convinced that if we do not get a democratic Brexit, meaning we've left the European Union, we've left the single market, we've taken back control of our borders, then I think the 2020 general election could be all about Brexit and finishing the job. So, let's just watch this space. Dara, thank you very much indeed. Next we go to Jean in Bellingham. Jean, good evening.
Good evening. Very nice to speak to you.
Hi there.
I believe very much in Jeremy Corbyn
yes.
and Labour. I think there's no alternatives left. You're not to be elected anymore. I did vote for you in the election, and I can't stand the Conservatives. And I think Jeremy Corbyn, he's a quiet man. And I think he's got things under control. Lots of people have voted to keep him where he is at the moment. Let him stay there. Let's have Labour back. Conservatives have ruined this country, and I look forward to him being Prime Minister.
Well, Jean, I don't for a minute, doubt that he's a very decent, polite, sort of non-backstabbing style politician who's been very consistent to his principles, in nearly 34 years that he's been in Parliament. But I think the problem is that so much of that Labour vote, traditional Labour vote, is what I would call a very patriotic vote. Fiercely believes in the country and support for the armed services. And here's a guy who couldn't bring himself to sing the national anthem when he was in St Paul's Cathedral for the 75th anniversary of the Battle of Britain, has appeared at times in the past to have much more sympathy with Irish Republicans than he had with the British Army, and basically supports open borders. And, isn't that a problem, Jean, for him?
Oh, that really, really is a big, big problem. But, okay, we can put him down, we can say this, we can do that. He's a man, he's just a man, okay, he's running to be Labour leader, he's Labour leader, and he may be Prime Minister too, judging by what's going on in the world today, all these crazy things keep happening. And he probably will be. and you'd be a good one. I mean, I just think that, that he's put your money on him.
Well,
because there isn't anything else.
Well, you'd certainly get a shade of odds, Jean. That's absolutely right. Just as you would have done on Brexit this time last year and Trump. None of us know what's going to happen in the future. You think he's a very decent fella. You think he'd be a good leader. I'm just not convinced that he represents that patriotic old Labour voice enough, and I think they're drifting away from him. We've had calls tonight from Burnley and places like that, which have been Labour forever. Jean, I don't know, you don't know, we'll see, and thank you. Helen in Dartford. Good evening, Helen. What do you think?
Oh, hello. I'm just... I don't think things are going to stay like this in terms of opinions towards Corbyn. Mm-hmm. Because I think that as the kind of implications of Brexit kick in, especially in the next year and further on...
What you mean, when we all get richer?
No, quite the opposite. I think as we all get poorer.
Oh, right. Oh, God. Well, it's funny you should say that, Helen, because we're going to be discussing later on this evening the 5 big business groups in this country, nearly all of whom supported Remain and gave us dire warnings about what would happen. Have all come out with a very positive statement for 2017. But you're obviously worried about it.
Well, I'm hearing things like that inflation's going to go up next year.
Well, let's hope it does, Helen. Let's hope it does. A little bit of inflation wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing for the economy. Deflation is actually a more serious problem for an economy, as any look at Japan over the last 20 years will tell you. So if it's a little bit of inflation, I'm not that worried about it.
So what's going to happen about all the kind of low-wage immigrants? What's going to happen? Are they going to be sent home or what? I mean,
nobody.
What's going to happen to them?
No, I mean, nobody at any point on the Leave side in the referendum said that we should overturn, a legal deal. People came here legally because they were allowed to do so. We're not talking about sending people back, but we are talking about having much stricter controls on who comes in the future. But I mean, Corbyn. I mean, look, you may be right. We could have a recession, not necessarily caused by Brexit. We could have a recession because of what's happening in the Eurozone. There are lots and lots of reasons why economies can go up or go down. But do you think if the economy goes down that Corbyn becomes the benefactor?
Well, yeah, I do, because I think as people's living standards go down, and as, there's a massive problem with poverty in this country, and... it's obviously people are going to go more to the left, aren't they?
Well, they may do. And certainly, if you're going leftwards towards Corbyn, you've got quite a long way to go, because he's a long way out there on the left. And I've got time for a last call on this subject, just very quickly. Kaz in Hillingdon. Good evening, Kaz.
Good evening. How are you? Right?
I'm well. What do you think of Mr. Corbyn?
I support him. I believe he's correct in many of his views. Such as renationalisation. I believe we should renationalise certain services in the country.
Yep.
Such as the energy sector.
Yep.
And also, I believe that we shouldn't have left the European Union. It's a fool's errand, basically.
But we did, Kaz.
And, we've got the internet. And because of the internet, we have open borders anyway. So you've got all these American companies, they... sell online, no one goes to the high street anymore. Well, the high street is being decimated, all the money leaves the country, and this is not because of immigrants, this is the internet, and we can't just leave the internet.
Well, no one, Kaz, nobody, again, in the Leave campaign did anything other than say that one of the reasons for leaving the failing European club was for us to go global. But look, I take your point, and actually, renationalising industries is something that is quite popular with a big segment of the population here. However, I'll tell you what I think. I think that McCluskey's right. I think Labour are in trouble with Corbyn as their leader. He does not appeal to what's called the patriotic working classes. But I think Labour's problem is deeper than that, because however many MPs resign, however many by-elections are fought, whatever happens, Corbyn can't be removed, because he's got a new Labour Party membership that completely support him. Many of them would rather follow their own intellectual purist vision of socialism than they would win the next election. The only people that can ditch Corbyn, actually, I believe, are the trade unions. Thank you very much for that. Well, the Chief of Police in Cologne did something very controversial. He stopped 1,200 North Africans from going into the centre of Cologne. Remember that a year ago, there were open mass sex attacks on the streets of Cologne, particularly outside the station.
Accidentally raping someone.
Condemned and criticised by many on the left, by the Green Party. They've said that racial profiling is completely and utterly wrong. But ask yourself a question. If you had been the Chief of Police in Cologne, what would you have done with New Year's Eve coming up? Did you make the right bold decision, or was it just plain wrong?